Hello friends, blessings to you each. I hope you're all well. I want to talk in this video about loving kindness practice. The Pali word is mettā, also translates as friendliness or benevolence or goodwill. This is one of the most beloved meditation practices in our system. And for many Western practitioners, in some lineages, has almost supplanted concentration meditations like working with the breath or body or sounds as the primary anchor for meditation. And in some cases has become, in a way, the center of their entire practice. And I think in some ways this is really beautiful. Recognizing in the sense of the different meditations all being skillful means, the profound need that many people have to heal or restore the well-being of the heart before anything else can happen. And so loving kindness practice becomes a place where, or a field within which the healing of the heart can happen. The restoration of self-love, the long process of forgiveness and coming into clarity around past harms caused to us by others and harms that we've caused to others. In a culture where hatred and fear and division seem to be the norm, loving kindness practice suggests that love or love of each other in community is not just a beautiful idea or even something that should be the result of liberation practice or realization practice, but something that can be at the very heart of how we relate to being practitioners, how we relate to the process of liberation, to free the heart. And there are many, many texts in the early Buddhist canon, in the Pali canon, that mostly I'll refer to, that praise the meditation on loving kindness and its related states, the divine abidings, the Brahma Vihara, as both skillful means and skillful ways to be or abide, rest, cultivate, embody while we're alive, but also are conducive to liberation. With some details, right? In some particular ways, the relationship between cultivating love or kindness and cultivating eventually the dispassion that unfolds as profound equanimity and liberation get fleshed out. So we'll talk about that at some point, maybe just a tiny bit today. What I want to do in this video is mention in brief the two primary styles of loving kindness meditation that are being taught. One of them is substantially more prominent, to the extent that many people think that it's the only way to practice loving kindness. And I want to bring in an alternate method and look at the source text in the Pali Canon that points us toward this alternate method. Within the insight meditation community and the Theravāda Buddhist communities more broadly, loving kindness practice, or mettā practice, is almost entirely thought of as being comprised of a contemplation of love or loving kindness, friendliness, in the form of repeating phrases. So in a way that many of you will be totally familiar with, the practitioner settles into meditation or in any posture or throughout the day, but I'll speak as if we're sitting in meditation. Gathers one's attention into the body and particularly into the heart center, connects with the feeling of love, if possible, but invokes it, invites the feeling of love, brings to mind somebody for whom it's easy to feel love, And the traditional suggestion is to begin with oneself. Many of us have a hard time beginning with ourselves, and so the standard instruction in the insight meditation lineage has become starting with someone who is traditionally called a benefactor, like a teacher or a guide, someone who is not a lover or a child of yours, like not someone who is complicated to love, where there's a lot of drama, someone who's very easy to love, where there's respect and honor. And even here, in a time when there's so much trauma in spiritual communities, the category benefactor or teacher can be charged, and it can also be difficult here to find, who is a pure recipient for this practice. And it's not necessary, actually, to find a pure recipient, but we do the best we can within the field of relationships that we embody, to find someone that we can love unreservedly. And many teachers now will speak to using a non-human being here, like my teacher James Beres speaks about using his dog in this category, and many other teachers have talked about that as well. I find this also, poignant in a certain way, that we are a culture with so much privilege and so much goodness and wisdom, and yet some people can't find. I don't know if this is true about any particular teacher or any particular person who does this, but I do know some folks who have said that they can't find someone who is really easy to love, more than like their pet, their dog. So you can totally use your dog, or you can use a more distant figure that can carry the projection of purity for you, whether that's a famous saint, like Dr. King or Nelson Mandela or the Dalai Lama, or someone who, again, is easy to love. So you would do that to start with. And then the practice would proceed through categories, traditionally benefactor, self, friend, neutral person, difficult person, and then categories of all beings. And the idea here is that you would generate a feeling using whatever object is most easy to generate that feeling. And then in a kind of sleight of hand, you take away that object, you take away the easy person, and you put in a slightly more difficult person. You say, well, if I can really love my dog, with this way, oh, it feels so good, I love them so much, then you just switch in and say, well, I could actually, what if I could love myself in that way? Or what if I could love just my friend in that way? Oh, I do. And it gets really interesting when you start to trade out beings that you know personally or close to you for neutral beings. So you say, oh, I really love my friend, and I'm generating feelings of love thinking about my friend. And then you take out your friend and you put in, the cashier at the grocery, or your postal clerk, or somebody sitting across the room from you on retreat. Not the person you have a crush on, but the person that you barely notice, right? Somebody like, oh, that person, that's the person walking down my street. The guy picking up the trash who just pulled up, you say, oh, you just substitute them. And there's this way that you get to do this beautiful emotional sleight of hand, because you still feel love, and then you see them and you're like, well, they're a person, they suffer, they have cares, they love, they have a family. Of course they want to be safe and happy and peaceful. And so then you just wish it upon them. And as the practice develops, you essentially practice continually strengthening the feeling of love with all of these different categories of beings, or standings for categories of beings, until you get to the category of all beings. And in this method, this is the Frasers Method, you would then, again, go kind of methodically through categories of beings. So you could say, all beings who walk on 2 legs, all beings on 4 legs, or you can phrase this different ways. You could say all animals, all insects, all fish, all birds, all beings in the spirit realms. You could do it within more like human groups. You could say all people of this race or that race, all people in this place or that place, this culture, that culture, children, people of different various genders, old people, people in different categories, really all as a way to say, not like you have to do all the categories, but the main practice is to recognize that the feeling of love can remain strong, independent of its object. And that's the point of the whole thing. The point of the whole thing is not to figure out how to love people who are different from you, or who are your neighbors, or yourself. All of those are steps along the path and are necessary. I think they're healing steps to figure out how to love ourselves, to figure out how to love people that are more like us, to figure out how to love people who are different from us. But the goal of the whole thing is to generate the feeling of love as a kind of radiant universal quality, so that it bit by bit kind of includes everybody, and you have a kind of robust loving that you could put anybody in the hot seat of your loving kindness practice and say, oh, this person that's really difficult for me, and there's a category for that, the difficult person, sometimes called the enemy. I hope you don't have too many enemies, but you probably have some difficult people. Many people use political leaders as their difficult people. I did a 2-month-long loving kindness retreat back during the George W. Bush presidency, and for a while, trying to heal attachment wounds, I had used my mother as my difficult person until it wasn't working anymore because I loved her in a kind of personal way, like, oh, you're not difficult, Mom, you're just my mom, So that stopped. She stopped being my difficult person. That will happen. You lose your difficult people because they become no longer difficult. So I used the president, who at that time was the worst president ever, to me, and it was really sweet to do so, because separated from the context of needing to fight against his policies or whatever, he turned out to be really quite obviously just a person who wants to be happy and who has a family and who enjoys pleasure and fears pain and probably wants to be alive and fears death like all the rest of us. It turns out to be pretty easy to extend the feeling of love toward everyone. And it's important here to be precise, that the feeling of love doesn't equal, for instance, a free pass on all of their sins. It doesn't mean that I suddenly wasn't going to fight against his policies, or didn't even think that I could do this for someone who's a terrible criminal. And it doesn't mean I think that they shouldn't be in jail or whatever, or that the policies that they passed shouldn't be changed to be more equitable or more just. But it means that I am refusing to close my heart off to their basic goodness as a living being. Or even if we stay away from terms like goodness, because that has implications like, oh, is there evil? What is evil? If we stay away from that whole realm, we could just say, for my own benefit alone even, much less my community, my family, my culture, I choose to practice keeping my heart open to everyone. And again, this is an abstraction in a certain way. Metta meditation is not immediately the seed of your actions in the world. I'm not going to say, oh, and automatically this should govern all my actions throughout my whole life. I think ultimately it does. But we start off with just the feeling. It's like, oh, the feeling of love. So in this style of practice, the Frasers practice, you would work through categories of beings. And as you do, you would maintain a kind of visualization or an inner image of that person or persons or category of persons. And maintain a felt sense, to whatever degree you can, of the feeling in the heart or through the whole body or through the whole field of your awareness. And then as you do that, the mechanism of doing that is that you would repeat generally a set of 4 phrases. So there's lots of different versions of these phrases, and folks are always encouraged to make up ones that work for you. But traditional phrases generally refer to qualities like safety, happiness, peace, well-being, strength. Things that I would, in a generic sort of way, wish upon anyone, whether I agree with their actions or not. And so the phrases that I have been using for 20 years, that are a slight variation of phrases that my teacher Sylvia Boorstein used and other teachers in my lineage, are these. So I'll say them in the second person, may you, but then you would modify them, may I, may we perhaps, may they for all beings, or simply may all beings. May you be safe from harm of all kinds, inner and outer. May you be happy and peaceful. May you be strong in body and mind. May you live with the ease of well-being. And so you would just take these phrases and start to spin them. We might say spin them in the heart. That's a phrase sometimes used in the Tibetan practice for mantra practice, is you kind of turn these phrases around the heart. So you've got an image of the person, you're turning the phrases around, you just keep saying them over and over and over. Say them, feel the feeling, say them, feel the feeling. When I did a 2-month retreat on this, I was instructed to do 2 weeks of mettā for myself first. So I did 2 weeks of just may I be safe, may I be happy, may I be strong. All day, every day, from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to sleep, through sitting and walking and eating and all the in-between times, continuing to hold the phrases. And you're going for a kind of continuity here. This is a concentration practice in addition to an emotional practice. What always happens in loving kindness practice, of course, is that it's a kind of purification. So as I'm doing the phrases, thinking of my people, I'm invoking the quality of love. You know what happens when you invoke the quality of love? What you're doing essentially is you're saying, may I become more aware of my heart. And so as you become more aware of your heart, what you become aware of is everything that's there, which is not all loving kindness. Otherwise you wouldn't need to do the practice. So I'm practicing, may I be happy, and my heart goes, I'm not happy, I'm miserable. I say, may I be safe. I don't feel safe. I say just in directing toward another person, may you be safe, may you be happy, and I'm like, I'm just angry. I'm angry, or I'm afraid, or I'm confused, and all of that is normal. Essentially, doing loving kindness practice, any of the Brahma Viharas, the divine abidings practice, it's a way of knocking on the door of the heart and saying, okay, I'm going to give you some attention. Open the doors. Let's see what's there. Let's bring some light in. And all the demons are in there. So don't ever lose heart. Don't lose heart while practicing, because all of it really is just a process of, we might say, cleansing or scrubbing the heart center. Washing, soaking, kneading pleasure. That's the ancient metaphor for concentration practice. Kneading pleasure into the heart, into the whole body, through maintaining the focus on love. And you would do this for loving kindness and for the other 3 of the divine abidings, which are compassion, sympathetic joy, or gladness, and equanimity. So that's the phrases style, and that's the most common method of loving kindness practice that's taught in the insight meditation tradition and largely throughout Western Buddhism. But there is starting to be taught another style based on the way this practice is worded in some of the early Buddhist texts. And one of the most inspiring teachers teaching in this style right now is a Western monastic, a German man who ordained in Sri Lanka, named Bhikkhu Analayo. And Analayo has been one of the most inspiring and prolific scholars of early Buddhism, the Pali Canon and the Chinese Agamas, looking at the early texts, and has maintained a deep focus on the meditative practices. And so some of how I teach this other style of mettā is indebted to his practice. So gratitude to Bhikkhu Analayo for opening this aspect of practice so beautifully for many of us. I want to look now at the text that describes this practice, and then I'll describe the practice itself a little bit. This is what I will generally call the radiating style of loving-kindness practice, or mettā practice. And this is a practice that doesn't use phrases, doesn't use images of people, and doesn't use categories of, people close to you, people further away, different kinds of beings. All of that is useful and was developed somewhat later than the early discourses, was developed into what's called the commentarial period, and was written down primarily in a text called the Visuddhimagga in 5th century Sri Lanka by Buddhaghosa. And so the phrases and the categories, all of that comes from the commentaries, and it's beautiful practice. But in the earliest texts that we have access to, in the Pali Canon and the Chinese Agamas, there's this different languaging. So I'm going to look at a text here from the numbered discourses of the Buddha called the Anguttara Nikaya, and this is from what's called the Book of the Fours. These are all the chapters in the Anguttara, the numbered discourses, are arranged in sets of lists. So this is in the set of lists with 4 things in them, and this is Anguttara 4. 126, so discourse number 126 in the Anguttara Nikaya. And it's the sutta itself in Pali is called the Duttiya Metta Sutta. It's not the same as the famous Metta Sutta, which is the Karaniya Metta Sutta. And on the website Sutta Central, that I will primarily use as my reference, the Australian monastic Bhikkhu Sujato has done a beautiful translation of vast stretches of the discourses, and he translates this discourse simply as love, and I like this a lot. He translates the word mettā simply as love, and not all translators do that. Some prefer the term loving kindness, which comes more or less from King James English, King James Bible English. That's where the term, I believe, originates or shows up most prominently. And so it was the term chosen to translate mettā by the early translators. But I really love the translation love because in a certain way it has more punch to it, more charge. And for my heart, at least, it touches into the quality that I'm trying to generate most easily. So, Anguttara 4:126, love, describes 4 kinds of people. So here's how the text reads in Bhikkhu Sujato's translation. Mendicants, these 4 people are found in the world. What for? And Sujato uses the word mendicants for the term bhikkhus, which means homeless ones or wanderers or monastics. And so, as in many of the discourses, this indicates that the Buddha was speaking to his monastics. So this can be men and women monastics, the bhikkhu and bhikkhuni sanghas. Mendicants, these 4 people are found in the world. What for? Firstly, a person meditates, spreading a heart full of love to one direction, and to the second, and to the third, and to the fourth. In the same way, above, below, across, everywhere, all around, they spread a heart full of love to the whole world, abundant, expansive, limitless, free of enmity and ill will. So this is a stock phrase describing this kind of practice. A person meditates, spreading a heart full of love to one direction and then a second and third and fourth. This refers to basically the compass directions around one. And it can also refer to the directions coming from the body, which is how this practice proceeds. So spreading a heart full of love, to the front, to the side, to the back, to the other side. And you can go in a circle. I go in a circle around myself. So I kind of stitch together the horizontal field first, right? Love radiating in that direction, out to the front, and then out to the side, and out to the back, and out to the other side. And you can use a visualization with this if it works for you, thinking about like where you are on the planet. Sometimes I will do this linked in even with a meditation on place or a land acknowledgement, knowing exactly where I am culturally, but also, geophysically in a way, and then shine the quality of love out, in that direction. At the moment I'm facing south, so, I might think of, the rest of Oakland and then the rest of California and the whole, southern part of North America and then Central America and South America, and I'm kind of seeing or feeling the map of the globe ahead of me. And don't get caught up in mental ideas about like the roundness of the globe and flat Earth. Don't go all flat Earth on this. Although the ancient Buddhist cosmology is a flat Earth image, there's no need for that to be in conflict with modern science. I'm saying that just as a footnote for the flat earthers. I don't know, it's not you, I don't know. But there you go. Don't worry about that, but actually just go with what your intuition feels. You might even be like, oh, to that direction, and then out into space, all the galaxies in that direction infinitely, and that is the direction that we're eventually going to go. So you do that for each of the directions, front, side, back, other side. And then the text says, in the same way, above, below, across, everywhere, all around. So then kind of shining it upward, shining it downward. You could think of all the beings above, the birds and all that. But you don't need to get specific. You could just like radiate that heart of love upward and then radiate it downward into the earth and beyond, out into space. Across and everywhere and all around, and just filling out, basically, the sphere of spatiality, of embodied presence in space with directions all around, spreading that heart quality of love. And so you might feel already that this has a differently embodied quality than the phrases thing, where you're seeing a mental image of a person and repeating phrases. Both of those can tend toward the mental. And that's not random, because in the Visuddhimagga, in the commentarial practice, there's a very strong push toward the absorption states of jhana that sometimes can be entered very easily for folks doing this kind of slightly abstracted practice. You can get very focused on a mental image and the repetition of phrases. This one is a little more diffuse. It can totally lead to jhana as much as the others can, but the pathway is a little different, because the pathway is spatial and embodied. So you're kind of contacting a feeling, filling out the body with that feeling, and then radiating it out, And it can almost feel sometimes like the sense of your body itself expands. If I'm shining a quality through my right side, out, 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 it can feel like everything in that direction is part of my right side, right? The sense of the body gets malleable and a little bit soft, or it can. And so this style of mettā can be really pleasurable in a couple of ways. For me, one of the ways that it's pleasurable is that it's less discursive. There's less words in it. So there's really the sense that I can just turn toward a feeling, turn toward the feeling of love, the heart full of love. And again, full, the heart full of love, that's a metaphor, right? And what does it mean, the heart full of love? What does it actually feel like? It's going to be a purification the same way any of them are. I say like, may a heart full of, the heart full of love, spreading in this direction. I might still notice like, oh, but I'm grumpy, I'm bored, I'm tired, I don't feel loving. It's okay, right? You just continually turn toward it and spread it in that direction. And the closing instruction on this radiating is abundant, expansive, limitless, free of enmity and ill will. So abundant, expansive, limitless, the instruction in a way will be, and again I'll use the metaphor of kneading, kind of kneading the feeling into the whole body. It leads toward a sense of feeling in all directions. I put out my kind of psychic feelers into the whole universe, front and back. Like, don't ignore what's behind, what's behind me. That could be both a metaphor and just a meditative instruction to bring awareness to the back body and the back space. But bit by bit, I try, in a sense, to encompass the entire universe as broadly as my imagination can take it in, or my felt sense can take it in. We might even say my proprioception, which is the sense of how the body is arranged in space, where the body is in space. How my proprioception can take it in, the whole universe. Abundant, expansive, limitless. I try not to leave any part out, right? And again, I try not to leave any being out. This method, in a way, encompasses all the categories of the previous method, but without naming them. You just try to envelop the whole field of space in this big love. And then free of enmity and ill will, free of hatred and fear, of dislike. That instruction is difficult, of course, because even if I, in some abstract way, envelop the whole world in loving kindness, so often, it's like, well, but those people, that guy in power, or this person who mistreated me, or this person, or this class of people who mistreats this other class of people, I'm not so sure about them. That's okay. That's part of the purification as well. But this is training not specifically in being, a warrior for a certain kind of justice, where you would want to really differentiate between, perpetrators and victims of a kind of oppression, but toward actually being more of a saint who doesn't differentiate, who says, okay, the ones who do the most harm, the evil ones, may they be protected, may they be safe. And I think that the approach of the saint or the bodhisattva or the awakened one is rooted in a profound wisdom that understands that causing harm is itself just a symptom of deeper trauma, and that if a being was held in safety, held in loving kindness, held in care, well cared for as a person among a healthy community of people, that they wouldn't actually be causing harm in the way that they are. That greed and violence and are symptoms of systemic toxins or traumas or failures of care such that the people really acting them out the most are, in a certain way, among the most wounded by them. And again, that doesn't excuse any actions or say that appropriate, restrictions on their actions shouldn't be put in place. It certainly doesn't say that they shouldn't be voted out of power. Haha, please vote. But it recognizes with wisdom really the source of harm. So this is the main practice then. Settling the body, coming into quite a full sense of the body. And when I teach this practice and practice it for myself, I most often pair it initially or build it on a foundation of the whole body breath. So I'm breathing, tracking the in and out breath, and then bringing the breath into the whole body, seeing if I can feel the expansive and contractive wave of the breath out into the arms and hands, down into the legs and feet, through the whole field of my body. It's the same kind of practice, really, right? You're just breathing and you're expanding the field of breath from the physical out into all the cells, out into the space around me. And then with that as a foundation, I'll move into this loving kindness practice. So I'll say, from this full sense of the body breathing, then I begin to generate the feeling of love. Often I'll just smile a little bit, turn almost like my emotional gaze. Loving awareness is the term that my teacher Jack Kornfield uses. Turn loving awareness toward, the quality of love itself and expand it, friendly, myself, others, everyone, and then just start to shine it forward. And I'll give my attention to each direction. So I don't try to go all at once. In a variation, sometimes I'll do all the directions at once, but slowly. So like I'm blowing up a balloon, I'll try to kind of feel the field of loving kindness and presence around me slowly expand in all directions all at once. Like all the galaxies are expanding away from each other all at once as the universe expands. You can expand the universe of your loving kindness. That one's a little subtle. You have to stay very close to. I have to stay very close to feeling to do that one. But the method, at least as described in the texts, seems to be that you could go methodically through the directions and then above and below and then filling out. Abundant, expansive, limitless, free of enmity and ill will. So mostly I'll stop there for now. The text goes on, and I'll talk another time about the second part of this in this beautiful text, where first it describes that practice, and then it describes a wisdom practice, basically a contemplation of everything that one encounters in that field as impermanent, suffering or painful, and ultimately selfless. And then it says where a person who practices in this way is reborn, and which is in the realm of the gods of the pure abodes. So there are heaven realms associated with these qualities of love and compassion and sympathetic joy and equanimity. And so in a way that's true across the Buddhist meditative states, if you really specialize in one of those things, the idea is that you spend so much time there in a certain way that you're oriented toward that quality, that abiding. And then when you die, you are then reborn in a realm that's characterized by that, and you live there with the gods for a very long time. If you look this up, the immediately preceding text, Anguttara 4, 125, is also interesting. It has the same practice in it, but it specifically talks a little bit more about the rebirth piece, about like, you get reborn in a particular heaven realm associated with this thing, and it talks about the difference between kind of ordinary people and people on the path to awakening, where ordinary people kind of exhaust that lifetime and get reborn back in somewhere else, and other beings with a stronger direction toward awakening can become enlightened right from that realm, which means they become what's called non-returners. So don't worry about that part, unless you're getting there, and may you. But you can go look at those two texts. And what is beautiful about this method, is that in its simplicity, it becomes a way to integrate breath and the feeling of love and the sense of kind of embodied fullness. And from that deeply embodied, very pleasurable and very emotionally warm state, the contemplation on impermanence and suffering has a very different tone than if I were to enter it from my ordinary, not quite so juiced up state, where I would look and see suffering, and there's so much, it's easy to see. And my heart might not be ready to hold it, might not be actually able to bear witness to it. And so this becomes a beautiful practice, as described here, of nourishing the body, the heart, with this extraordinary quality, and then from that base, in limitless love, then taking in the suffering of the world. And there's a very clear parallel here to Kuan Yin practice. And if you come from a Christian background or have connections to Christ, I believe there's a beautiful and clear parallel to what feels to me as an ex-Catholic like the heart of Christ's teaching as well. This basis in profound love that then meets the world from a place of limitless love and compassion and inclusion. So, thanks for listening, and blessings in your practice. I'll see you soon.